We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Coley, and welcome to the big ticket interview for Universal Pictures' Oppenheimer. I am joined by the cast and filmmakers. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello. Hey.
Mr. Christopher Nolan, sir, I have to start with you because I love the inception of this film. Yes, I did do that because it sprung forth from your pages of Tenet. And I love the idea that that line sort of gave birth to this hyper-realistic tale that gets told across 11 miles of 70mm film. Like, that's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, I've been interested in Oppenheimer for some time, and we put it in Tenet as an analogy, but this idea of the moment where Oppenheimer and his team couldn't entirely rule out the idea that when they let off that first device, they'd start a chain reaction that would destroy the world. That just seemed like the most incredible moment in time to take the audience to and be in that room with them.
One of the things I love with it too, because how incredible the story is you take a 20-year collaborator and put him in his a lead role with this one, but how quickly in that process did you center in on Cillian as the person to portray him? Because he's just such a paradoxical man, such a conundrum. Sitting here, I kind of maybe get it. Maybe that was part of it, something that you saw in your kinship with him. But yeah, when did you just select him for the part?
You know, when I'm writing, I try to be disciplined and not write with actors in mind, because then you're writing something you've already seen them do and it's limited. But when you finish the script, then for me I was adapting the book American Prometheus, so the book sitting there with the real Robert Oppenheimer staring out with this incredible sort of blue-eyed stare from the cover of that book, and I thought, well, I know who could do that. Yeah. And I've been lucky enough to work with Cillian for 20 years now, and but never in a leading role. And this time I got to make that call and say, yeah, this is the one. You're going to take center stage, and you're going to really carry the audience with you on this journey.
I think there's something to be said for your eyes, sir, in this picture. I'm just going to put that out there. We've seen those first look images. For a long time, that's all we had was just a picture of your face in this costuming.
You see how I just got out of his light when you
That's a pro.
It's hypnotic, but I will say for you, I loved reading how that phone call, because again, you guys have worked together. I mean, to go from shivering soldier to this moment, I just love that you have a relationship that can play out in this many chapters. But for you, what was it like again, just take us to that phone call and knowing that you're going to get to do this?
I mean, that was one of the great days. You have a few of those in your career, and that's been the best so far. I mean, this typical Chris fashion, there's no text or preamble. I might be writing something, just came straight out of the blue. So it was a shocker, but like the best type of shocker, you know.
I love this too because all of you maybe get that shock moment. I guess he maybe texts or calls all of you to get that.
No texting.
No texting, sorry. No texting, excuse me.
Texting.
I don't know why I got so digital. Who am I talking to? Yeah, keeping it analog here. But for you, Mr. Robert Downey Jr., sir, I have to say this role, I have to say after decades of watching you play a hero, seeing you go up against Oppenheimer as Strauss has been so incredible. And I loved Chris talking about how you got to just lose yourself in it. Did you like losing yourself in a bit of a slippery character, if I have to say?
Yeah, I love a good protagonist. Just to double up on Cillian's, mine was I read the script, I was mind blown, and then Chris said, will you do it? So forget text and all that. It just cuts right to the chase. But there is literally, that's called a director. He's very direct. And it's why everything, like you said, Matt, by the time I got to set, you said, Downey, everything happens in front of the camera. You're going to love this. You said to me. Emily said, I'm telling you, this is going to be a life-changing experience. Of course, he already knew. But then he was in front of it, and that was the real joy, was to show up for someone we all admire and watch him carry this ball across the line.
I do have to say, what you see on screen, just your performance after seeing you again in maybe digital formats, your face needs 70mm in this performance. All of your faces need 70mm on the screen for what you guys are doing. It's absolutely incredible, and you've assembled this cast, but I have to say, Emily, I know that you wanted to work with Christopher Nolan and reteam with Cillian, but Peaky Blinders and your love for it just had to factor in because he's got a hat on. So like, I'm kidding. No, but coming in,
he looks great in a hat.
He does look good. He does do a hat very well. But coming into this one, what I really folks I think are going to find out is how incredible Kitty was and what we don't know about her, because we get to explore her in a way. I've seen some of the other portrayals of the Manhattan Project. We see her in a way we've never seen before. Was that what sort of brought you into the character?
It was Chris's script. It was an extraordinary part. She's a fireball and complicated and not the archetypal sort of conformist of 50s housewife, you know. He's her fourth husband at 29.
Yeah.
But I think they were like comets coming together, and she was clearly a monumental presence in his life, but not an easy woman. I read this line in American Prometheus that Chris encouraged us to read, and it said, she didn't do small talk, she only did big talk. And it was so emblematic of the character, really. But I mean, I just had the best dialogue and the best scenes, and I think my scenes with Cillian were very emotional and wrought and exciting. It's where you see the intimacy of this man, you see the private life and the trauma of a brain like that, and it was just so exciting to get to work with Kill again. And I'd loved working with him on Quiet Place too, and I think having that trust and secret language we already had established was huge, you know, jumping into this rather tempestuous couple that I remember Chris saying when we did the camera test, we were in our prosthetics, and Chris went, God, I'd never want to have them over for a dinner.
That would be, oh my God, honestly.
I wouldn't want the Oppenheimers coming over, you know.
But you would feel obligated to invite him.
You'd have to, I know, and you'd know it would get messy.
Auntie Perry, that's I'm sorry, I'm just going to be sitting with that for a minute. What's so interesting is the people that were surrounded by the great man, as much as he was doing they were integral to him doing what he did. And your character, Matt, I think is another one of those interesting things that are around him as another leader in the Manhattan Project. But he was such an interesting ally because he was part of that conservative soldier movement that was going up against these liberal scientists. But y'all have probably the strongest relationship in the end of this. That's, again, talk about that balance that you had with the character and with their friendship.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Downey was saying, Chris is very direct. Like when he offered me Interstellar years ago, he said, you know, they say there are no small parts, there are only small actors. And I'm on the phone, I go, yeah. And he goes, this is a small part. so when he came with this one, we talked and he said, you know, the book is American Prometheus. It's this great Pulitzer Prize winning book. He goes, I'm not calling the movie that, I'm calling it Oppenheimer because it has to be entirely, it is going to be through his eyes. And when I read the script, I had never seen this before. It was written in the first person. Never seen that before, and it gave you as a reader that visceral, that subjective Oppenheimer experience. So instead of going Oppenheimer across to the window, it says I walk towards the window, and and it's just had this kind of immediacy and kind of visceral punch. And so you could see what he was trying to communicate to us and to his crew, like this is what the movie's going to be. And he said, what I need are actors in support of that. This entire thing is going on Cillian's back. And I need you guys to support that, right? And so that was that's a great kind of marching orders, very, actionable for us and easy to understand. And every day I was like, all right, how can I help that?
And how can I get more lines?
How can I get more lines? But watching the two of them, because it really is a partnership at that level, when you see a movie at this scale that is fearless enough to live in quiet moments, in IMAX on his face, and with everything that's going on. I mean, the most impossible moral quandaries, and live there. It's about these two guys being so locked in together, and watching them build that together, and then watching Chris build a movie around that performance was the rush. So in my case, it was, I'm one of the spokes of the wheel, and the tension between us is that the military is obviously obsessed with secrecy and compartmentalization, and as you say, the liberal scientists are like, open the kimono, let's share all of our knowledge so that we can get to the answer. And so there was this kind of natural tension, but despite that, these two guys actually really liked and respected each other, even though nobody else liked Groves. And so that was the fun thing to play, because I never had a character who was so brusque and blunt and just didn't give a shit. You know, because to be liked was so far down on his list of objectives. Like, if you asked him, like, do people like you? He would probably look at you like, I don't even understand the question. You know what I mean? Because what they were doing was so consequential. I mean, Chris has said, he's been on the record saying Oppenheimer is the most important person to live in the last 100 years, if not ever. And this movie is about the most important things human beings did, perhaps in the history of the species. And so to be part of a movie that's telling that story with a director who's at the absolute height of his abilities, you know, with a chance to support that performance, which to me is one of the great performances I've ever seen on screen, was thrilling. So.
Wow.
And this is from the man who colonized Mars.
I mean, seriously though.
I had no supporting cast.
Potatoes.
Just
the
potatoes.
potatoes were giving you a lot. It's incredible listening to the cast talk about it, because I've seen the film and it is like that. You want to discuss it and you want to have a moment with it beyond that. And I think this is a film that begs you to see it on the biggest screen possible with the best sound. But beyond all the visuals and sort of cinematic things, I think it's the fact that afterwards you need to talk to people. Yeah. Like last night, I'm outside of Lincoln Center and I'm like calling home. I'm like, we need to discuss this. And did you have that similar experience when you saw it? Like, I want to take into folks, because I know you all created this, but the visual experience of seeing it, I know you couldn't even grasp that on set, possibly.
I think Mr. Nolan, Maestro, is a singular storyteller in that all of his movies, even the most obvious one being the spinning top at the end of Inception, it's always inviting conversation. He's always presuming the audience wants to be elevated to a place where there's a dialogue that continues on. And then this is kind of the natural progression, you know? And I think about, like, what was Kubrick doing before he decided to pick one of his films, and you're just glad that there is this progression. But yeah, for sure. I mean, we're excited by it, and it's a roller coaster of just an experience cinematically, but it also is that thing that I think it's why you're responding the way you are. Yeah. You know, we want to be challenged by cinema at its best.
I can only think of the challenge that you were faced with this portrayal. First of all, I'm glad to see you here. You looked so sickly on screen. I'm sorry. I wanted to give you a sandwich through the whole runtime.
We all did. We were all in New Mexico, like, eating quesadillas, and he was, like, in his room eating an almond.
By the way, he declined every dinner invitation for the entire film. We invited him to dinner every night. He never came once.
I mean, that's a commitment to craft, though. It's a commitment.
The only thing Chris would do by text is his daily calorie count.
Oh my God. Oh, man, that's getting real. Let me bring it back a little bit, though, because with all of that you had to commit to the character, and knowing that this was a man that had so much written about him, you have to make him still real. You still have to make him someone you can live and breathe in. And I think for every actor they talk about, there's a moment where it switches. It stops being the research and the script, and it starts just being something you embody. What was that moment for you? Was it on set? Was it in pre-production?
Well, the approach I always take is do as much research as you possibly can, and there's so much out there about Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. There's so much archival footage out there you can access, and obviously I read the book, but for me the most important resource was the script. That's what I really worked on, and I had 6 months from when Chris called me unexpectedly and to when we started shooting to work on it. Having said that, I think when you get on the floor with actors like these guys and with Chris, you kind of just put that aside, and it all becomes kind of about the moment and the truth and the emotion between the actors, and that was just every day. It was a gift. I can't give you one specific point, but there was many scenes in the film, like with Robert and with Emily and with Matt, like they were just kind of electric. You could kind of feel it fizzing, and at that point, it isn't intellectual, it's kind of instinctual and emotional.
Well, the proof will be in the pudding when folks get to see it. I don't want to say this because I was lucky enough to see it last night in Lincoln Center on, like, that incredible screen where, like, literally the seats shook at certain points of explosions. But I have to say, I would feel cheated. I know everyone says this, but I'm like, no, I want everyone to have that. I was sitting dead center on the very back row. I want everyone to have that experience. I'd like for you, sir, Mr. Nolan, to explain some of the deliberate things you made in filming this, choosing to film it in IMAX, the first film to do it completely wall to wall. You did, I think, 80% on Dunkirk, and now this one is completely in that ratio. There's visual effects and moments in the film that beg that, and I know that you crafted it that way. I would love for you to talk about some of those moments that you made specifically to really sort of envelop this format and to expand it in ways that we haven't seen before.
Well, I've used IMAX for years, and IMAX film is the highest quality imaging format ever devised. And what that gives you is access to the audience's perceptions. It takes the screen away. I refer to it as sort of 3D without the glasses. You know, you're just looking at a crystal clear, sharp image. And we've used it in the past for a lot of action. We've used it for the grand vistas. And my director of photography, Hoyte van Hoytema, and myself, you know, we knew we would get New Mexico that way. We would get the storms, we would get the desolation of where they built Los Alamos. But what we both got really excited about is how can this format help give us access to Oppenheimer's thought process? How can it help us really peer into his soul? You know, what happens when you apply that grand format to intimacy, to what these guys are doing, you know, to really seeing the world through his eyes and trying to pick up the different layers of what everybody is thinking and feeling and all of the conflicts and paradoxical situations and ethical dilemmas that are going on. And we found that the format is a powerful tool for all aspects of cinema, really. And cinema is just about storytelling, and it's more than anything about the human element.
Again, yeah, the human element is definitely, I think, a big part of that one. Again, we talk about the interesting questions, sir. Folks that have seen the trailer, this is going to come out before they get a chance to see the film. The question that you sort of jokingly make in the trailer and that Chris talked about, like this idea that it could set fire to the world, becomes a much bigger question when you actually look at the film and as it goes to it. Was that originally from that script? Because I have to imagine as an actor, like, that's it. That's, you don't really, did you
central, like... It's like, how did they do that?
let me put it to you this way.
But like, I love like Downey's character. He's obsessed with this conversation that these two great scientists have. It's like, it's about the bigness and greatness of men and women and the smallness of us. You know what I mean? Like, human beings are just so, you know. So yes, to your point, like it's. There's a reason he wrote about it in Tenet. There's a reason it's in our movie. It's because it's kind of a central conundrum, like how they press the button anyway. How would you do that? If there was any possibility at all that you could wipe the species off the planet, like...
How do you press the button?
And they were taking bets on it.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing.
That's also what I think, though. How do you approach that day? You have to treat that, when we talk about layers, you have to give the absurdity of them taking bets, the reality of what he is saying, and then also the cinema of playing that out between these two characters. I just want to talk about that scene between the two of you.
Well, I just also say the incredible brilliance of Oppenheimer, but yet his naivete, right? To think that this is going to end, perhaps end all wars. There's a moment in the movie that I love, which is when the genie's out of the bottle and Oppenheimer realizes that he has no control of it when he comes and says to me, should I come to Washington? And I look at him and I go, why? And you just realize, oh my God, they're done with him.
Yeah.
You know, now this thing is a reality and it exists in the world, and he has no control over it. And yet in his own kind of innocent and beautiful way, you know, he was the only person who could have helped create it, but kind of thought it might be a force for good. And like, what a
naive way,
ridiculous thought in retrospect, but what an, you know, it's so tragic and so kind of beautifully human at the same time.
Playing that moment, there's so much your character goes through the course of this, his perspective on things that were closely attached to his very being, he changed his mind about. And again, this idea of a polyglot poet who created this weapon of mass destruction, he lives in those contradictions. How did you reconcile that in the performance? Because he's not conflicted as he's doing it. He's almost stoic in his decisions, but we know that he is literally battling battles within himself.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, we were kind of trying to play the kind of interior, I suppose. You know, it was to internalize the performance a lot. I think that's what we were certainly trying to do, and you know, certainly with all those amazing close-ups that Chris uses on the IMAX camera. Yeah, but they're the brilliant characters. You know, the ones that have that huge complexity and ambiguity and contradictions, and I don't know, we just kind of had to plot our way through it, particularly when you're shooting out of order as well, you know, trying to figure it all out, where he stood emotionally and morally at each point in the story. It's very, very complex. Certainly the most complex character I've ever approached.
Yeah, you told us a few weeks ago that there was something he said which I loved about that he's a chess player and not a boxer.
That was in a scene we had. Yeah, do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was early on, and I think I came in a bit heavy in that scene, and you said to me, "Yeah, Kill, he's not a boxer. He's a chess player." That's just an example of one of the unbelievably brilliant.
Which gives you total
precise-
permission as an actor, by the way, to just let the entire thing come to you.
But it just can turn a performance like completely on its axis.
One sentence can just
Pretty good at that.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. But the thing about that not shooting in order and you having to figure out that puzzle for yourself. And, you know, I'm there on set trying to gauge that for the audience. I'm the sort of audience's eyes on set. But it's really not until we get in the edit suite and sit there with Jen Lame, who's cutting the film, and then we see what all of you have done and it starts to fit together and you see the work that's gone in. Because I get to take that for granted when I work with people. They turn up to set, they do their thing, it seems simple, it often seems effortless, and then you get in the edit suite and you see how it relates to something an hour away in the film. And that's where you start to see the work that these guys have put in.
I think it's a testament to just listening to everybody sort of like geek out on what you guys did on set, but also just the fact that everyone got to be a part of it. I mean, this cast is incredible, and I think it's a testament to you. You have frequent collaborators, I think 5 Oscar winners, 8 nominees total. Like, this is a cast that is very stacked, but the selection process is equally as hard. I mean, some of the smallest roles, when I look at them, I'm like, yeah, that's a perfect casting for that creepy character or that like intriguing character. What is your sort of guiding force when you're making these selections? Because again, these are people that are part of the annals of history. I just look at somebody like, how did you see that Benny Safdie could play? Play that.
Well, Benny, I mean, I called Paul Thomas Anderson. Benny had just done Licorice Pizza, and I'm a big fan of Benny as a director. And you know, I called Paul and like, before I'd seen the film, you know, what do you think? And he's like, he's the best. You'll love it. And he was absolutely right. And Benny, you know, when I met Benny, it became clear that he had almost become a physicist. He literally had a moment in his life where it's like, it's physics or it's, you know, filmmaking. And so this was sort of irresistible.
As it was for all of us.
Yet again, no, he was fabulous. But the thing I had done at script stage is I decided, it's a risk, and, you know, I'm hoping the audience enjoys this. I didn't make composite characters. So we have a lot of people, we've got a lot of young new faces, we've got a lot of stuff going on, and you're trying to cast people with a particular energy that's memorable and fits the character. And I've worked with my casting director, John Papsadera, since Memento. And so he's brilliant at just finding all kinds of choices. And I get in the room with actors, I try to cast in person, not doing it all remotely and everything. And you try to sort of feel the energy of those people, and you get, you know, somebody like, you know, Alden Ehrenreich who comes in and plays
All
Downey
scenes
and
together are
just brings so much to the film.
Yeah. Emily, I definitely want to talk about this because one of the few scenes where we get to see, you know, Robert Oppenheimer emotion with any emotion has to do with you. And I love the fact that she was his ride or die. There's no other way to put it. Like, this was the person he was meant to be with. But she also is the person quickest to like call him out on his BS also. And I love that you got to play that. Like, this is no shrinking.
Is that marriage?
I get it. I don't know that yet, but I think I'll find out. Yeah, I'll find out. But yeah, talk about that. Like, just how she was the only one to, I don't care if you're the father of the atomic bomb, step up.
Yeah, I think particularly kind of at the, you know, later on in the movie and during the hearings, I think his passive approach must have just infuriated her, and you see it infuriate her because there's a directness and a forcefulness to the character and conviction. She's got real conviction about everything from drinking to, you know, being hard on him. And so I think that that's where you see the storm of the relationship start to kind of build, but you see the loyalty and the fight that she has for him. And I think she worshipped him. I think she thought he was incredible. And yeah, I think those scenes have impact in the film because she's maybe one of the only people who will just say what everyone else wishes they could, you know.
Unfortunately, again, I feel like I could spend another 30 minutes just talking about the crafts of this film. I want to spend an hour talking to your editor. I don't know what you put him or her through, but they have done all of the things with this one. It's absolutely incredible, but I have to talk about the visual effects, the special effects, and the realism that everyone knows that you're committed to. I mean, just how big was the bomb? Like, I just want to, like, just, you're being like, just, come on.
That's a hard thing to answer without giving away the tricks. The visual effects supervisor was first person after Emma, my producer, that I showed the script to, because I said to him, you know, I want you to take computer graphics off the table and think long and hard, and over a series of months, do some experiments and figure out ways in which we can show Oppenheimer's interior state, his visualizing of atomic behavior, of quantum physics, and then carry that thread right the way through to its ultimate expression in the extreme beauty and terror of the Trinity Test, the first time that human beings saw nuclear energy released in that form. And so he worked long and hard on some things that were very, very small and some things that were very, very big. And we got out there in that desert with these guys, and you know, we went through our own sort of mini version of that Trinity Test, where you're all out there in the desert in the middle of the night in your bunkers, very, very focused on what's going to happen and making sure that it's being done safely and carefully, but done on a suitably grand scale.
So who was on set that day? Matt. And so as an actor that day, there's no acting needed, right? Like
I call it NAR, no acting required.
Yeah.
NAR.
It's NAR. It's a NAR day.
It's a NAR day.
You just show up, you put on your wardrobe, and you go on out and enjoy the show.
Have a NAR.
It's that moment, but I'd have to ask you, Cillian, because again, that is probably the moment I knew about Oppenheimer before I read the book, before I knew anything, was just his quote and him watching that project. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Matt. I think you just have to, I don't remember us talking very much on that evening or those few nights that we were out, because you're aware of what this means and what actually went down and how, like, the world changed completely from what happened there. So again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It wasn't a kind of an intellectual approach. It was more of just like an emotional approach, because we all knew. I think everybody, when we were out there those nights in the desert, kind of knew what we were portraying. So
you're also putting yourself in that headspace, the anxiety, like what must have been the most profound anxiety, fear, hope, everything that they had riding on this. It was years of their lives. It was billions of dollars. Like, that's what Grove's thinking, right? He's probably thinking about how much it cost. But they're also thinking, wait a minute, we might end civilization.
Yeah. Again, the questions this film, it's just a paradox and dilemmas, and everything is so contradictory. You're asking a lot, I think, of the audience, in the sense like what they're going to see, they're going to be asking a lot of themselves afterwards. They're going to definitely have questions. I'm just curious for you, sir. I have to envision you have audience in your mind. You've thought about maybe what they would say after they leave the cinema and start talking about it. What questions do you hope they're asking? Because again, this is just his story, but it also, I think, allows room for the audience to take it where they want. And I think that's kind of interesting about it, too. So is there a place that you hope they go?
I don't like to be too specific about these things. I'm not making a documentary or a didactic statement or sending a specific message. To me, the most interesting cinematic stories, they involve you in the characters' dilemmas. They take you on that journey. And then if those stories have something to them, and this is one of the great dramatic stories of all time, I think, it leaves you with resonances, interesting questions, ways in which it interacts with our own lives and the way we live our lives and what we worry about and what we care about. But no, I don't want to be too specific about it. It's more, as Cillian was saying earlier, it's more of an emotional approach than an intellectual approach. You have the research, you have the history, you have the facts of the story, but you want the audience to feel it, and you want it to leave them with a set of sensations and feelings.
I think we will leave it there. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank all of you and remind everyone that Universal's Oppenheimer will be in theaters July 21st. Thank you.